Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Again, has to be careful of the speed.
What a comeback season for Hal Sutton.
Come right back toward the hole. How about in? That's the second eagle he's made it for this week.
17 years later, Hal Sutton is the Players' Champion.
He's got it going right at the flagstick. It'll be up. It is.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. Hal, what's happening?
Well, Rory got back in the winner's circle.
I feel like we deserve at least a nudge of helping him out a little bit, right? I mean, we've been talking about him on here for the last couple of weeks. You know, I mean, like we had anything to do with it, but you know,
I think he's got a team that we're not factored into. But I was happy to see him. You know, he's had a lot of negative talk going on because of the path he went down of trying to hit it longer. And, you know, you and I both have talked about how, you know, don't forsake your strength, trying to do something else. And he made mention, you know, before he won this last week that he felt like he had worked too hard on that and forsaken his strength.
Sure.
And, you know, for everybody listening out there, you know, I'm not advocating not working on your weaknesses. What I'm advocating is do not forget what got you there in the first place. Don't steal time from your strength in order to work on a weakness. Add more time to your weakness and still continue to work on your strength.
do you think it's an issue with tour players comparing themselves too much? Like, obviously, it's a problem with social media in the world and society we live in. Like, we're always trying to compare and all that stuff. But do you think tour players? You know, obviously Rory talked about Bryson, it affecting him. What Bryson's done has affected some other players for sure. I mean,
right.
You know, Rory was obviously really good, you know, and didn't really need to go down any other path, but just continue to work on whatever he needed to work on.
I think it's been long affecting players, not just in recent years. I mean, we all compared ourselves to others that were having success at the time, whether we lacked what they were doing or we were, you know, if somebody did something and then they had a lot of success doing it, we all went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were all looking to be as successful as we could be. And if somebody had some success doing it a certain way, we had to look into it.
Fear of missing out, basically.
You know, back in those days, teaching. Let's talk about that for a minute. You know, if you taught somebody something and they really had some success, all of a sudden that became the flavor of the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for everybody.
No.
You know, and I think one thing that tour players have it better now, and it's because of multiple reasons. They have a team of people around them that are aware of what they're trying to do, and they keep the same narrative.
Yeah.
And, you know, tour players are making enough money that they can hire enough people to be around them now.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't do that back in my day. We made good money, but we weren't making the kind of money that we could hire a team of people to travel
Sure.
with us all the time.
Well, and I would even make the argument there weren't enough experts around to even find them.
That's right. As we talked about today, most people were guessing in those days.
Talk a little bit about the 18th hole. I mean, you never played Quail Hollow, but you know, Rory. Two things I found interesting. You know, Rory talked about trying to hit three wood off the tee on 18, and he was trying to hit a cut, which I thought that was kind of an interesting choice.
Right.
You know, for me, I like to hit fades. I'm not comparing myself to Rory, but it's a lot easier for me to cut the driver than it is the three wood. And I think even one of our mutual friends, David Ogren, Facebook tweeted something about he thought that was kind of an interesting thought. The other thing I want you to talk about is the decision with the caddy and everything when he hit it in the left rough.
Well, I'm going to be talking about something that I didn't actually see in person. I didn't see it.
So I'll set it up for you.
Okay.
So talk first about, you know, the choice of club off the tee, and like so he takes 3-wood out and kind of looked like he toe hooked it a little bit and just kind of roped it left, water left, and ends up hooking it past the water into some thick rough, some junk, and kind of on a downslope. But did you feel like you cut the driver better than the 3-wood? I mean, was that an interesting choice?
It is an interesting choice. Let's look at this from the opposite side. The more loft I had, the easier it was for me to draw it.
Yeah, amen. And we talked about that.
We've talked about that a lot of times. The less loft I had, the easier it was for me to fade it.
Yep.
And when you get to a point like that, you want to put all the odds in your favor.
Yeah.
And I do think that was an interesting choice that he hit 3-wood.
Yep. So then he hooks it in the junk, and then you can see the ball. It's in grass, but it's in thick grass, and it's to go for the green, he's got to hit it high, or even if he was going to get a club on it and like lay up, he's got to get it up quick. And if he doesn't get up quick, it stays in the water. He's got a 2-shot lead. He's got to make bogey to win by 1. And the discussion was pretty interesting. They talked for a little while, and the caddy basically talked him out of hitting the shot and talked him into dropping. He knocks on the green and 2 putts from 30 feet. You've talked a lot about Freddie on here. Did you have any situations where Freddie completely overruled you, like with a decision of that magnitude?
No, I don't recall. I mean, we talk a lot about situational golf, and this was obviously a situational situation. Most of the moments where I had that were, pivotal moments in a career, the decision was pretty obvious. And so Freddie and I never got into a debate of that magnitude like that. But Freddie would have been capable had I had that.
If he needed to.
Yeah. It's great when a caddy and a player have the kind of relationship that they can do that.
Yeah.
Rather than just automatically rule out one opinion.
Sure. And it's great it worked out. Rory obviously needed the win. If Rory would have went for it and made a mess of it, it would have, it'd have been all over the news. And
well, here's one thing that I think we need to talk about is that when they finally made the decision, Rory committed to it, and that's why he ended up winning. Yeah. We talk about commitment all the time on here, and I hope everybody's listening. Most of these people, right or wrong, they're going to be committed to the shot before they hit it. They have to be.
Yeah.
And if you're a weekend golf or anything else, I mean, I'd venture a guess that you're not committed to 50% of your shots, maybe 25% of your shots. If we really dove deep into it, maybe 10% of the shots you hit, you're really committed to.
Sure.
And if you want to get better, let's try to get that percentage going north.
Yeah. Again, let's be able to define if it's a golf swing issue or if it's a mind issue. And most of you listening at home, your golf swings are probably better than you think, and it's the mind getting in the way. We've talked about that a ton.
Well, most of the people listening at home, what you're going to do with a shot. I mean, everybody comes in here and takes a lesson from us. They can define their shot to us, which means they know what they're fixing to do.
Yeah. Well, our guest this week is a big name in the industry. He moves the needle, let's say, and he's super intelligent. I respect him a lot because he does a ton of research with every opinion or every topic he's going to discuss. That he's gonna dive all in and learn as much about it as he can. Talk about our next guest.
Well, our next guest is Brandel Chambly. Brandel and I played a lot of golf together when I was on the tour and he was on the tour, and he's UT grad, and he's very smart, and he is opinionated, as everybody knows, but he's not just forming this opinion with no stats to back it up.
Right.
I mean, he's a researcher, and I value his opinion. I think he's one of the most intelligent guys in golf, to be honest with you. And he's not afraid to challenge and be challenged. Yeah. So y'all enjoy what you're about to listen to. Well, Brandel, it's an honor to have you on the Be the Right Club Today podcast. We played a lot of golf together in our lifetime, known each other for a long time. And I've watched you from in front of my television for a while, and enjoy what you do. You're not afraid to voice your opinion. And, I never really was either.
and I admire that in you. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Hal. It's a blast. I can remember when you would come out to Arizona to sort of tune up for the year. You'd be on the back of the range. You were a grinder just like me. I mean, you love talking golf swing. You love working on your game. And, you and I would sit back there. I don't know if you remember, but we'd sit back there and talk golf swing for hours, you and I. And you'd look at players. We'd talk about players. I can remember our rounds together. You and I would talk all day long about everything going on in the game of golf. You had strong opinions then, and I enjoyed listening to you. I mean, you were fierce on the golf course and to listen to. So it's a real pleasure. If anybody should have a podcast, for crying out loud, and what a great name, Be the Right Club Today. By the way, the most underrated high five in the history of golf is your second high five to Freddie. After he slaps your hand, you are walking, not even looking, and slap his hand. I mean, you hit it as accurately as you hit that daggum 6-iron into the green. It's just about the coolest, machoest shot and high fives ever in the game of golf.
Well, I have to tell you, Brandel, I was pretty glad that day was fixing to be over.
Oh, I bet you were. I bet you were.
Yeah.
I know I've told this story a million times, but that you finished on Monday, right? The players?
Yeah.
Monday. Yeah. So I had played, maybe cut, I don't know where I'd finished that, 30th or something, but I was in my hotel room at the Marriott there at the TPC, packing the suitcase because I was catching a flight, but had the golf on. And I was pulling, not like I wasn't pulling for Tiger, but you had such great conversations in the media center that week. One of my favorite lines, again, in the history of golf in the media center, was you saying, listen, because everybody's asking you about Tiger, because that's all anybody got asked about. And you said, listen, when I get down on my knees at night, I don't pray to Tiger. You remember saying that?
I do remember that. But, I was so put out, they wouldn't give it up. They were trying to make me believe that I'm supposed to lose, basically. And I'm like, nah, I ain't buying into this. So that was the only thing I could come up with that I knew would kind of squash everything.
Oh, it was so good because, look, nobody could compete with Tiger physically. But you were saying, at least in my view, I can hang with this guy mentally. And if I'm at my peak, if I do everything I'm meant to do, well, I think I can hang with it. Maybe not every week, but I can certainly get it done this week. And it was a great testament to mental strength, I thought. And I mean, of course, you hit the ball straighter than anybody could point. And on that golf course is more point A to point B. You're not cutting point A to shorten point B. And it was a great track for you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Listen, let's get started on stuff that we wanted to ask you about. I could go on and listen to you brag on that day. It was the highlight of my career. I appreciate you respecting that, which you do. And, I relive the moment sometimes. So thanks for the moment. So let's talk about the state of golf and instruction. What's your thought on distance and Bryson DeChambeau? And what Rory did recently, where he said he neglected his strengths and, worked too hard on distance, which I preach that all the time. Never neglect your strength because that's what got you there. If you want to work on your weaknesses, orchestrate more time to work on your weakness. Don't steal time from your strength.
Yeah, your tweets are great in that regard because you talk so holistically about, and I almost feel like you're talking to players, but you're also talking to parents. You're saying, look, this game's holistic. And I guess that's what Roy was getting at. As it relates to teaching today, and I've said this, for 40 years, teaching was just in the dark ages. I mean, they were guessing, and a lot of them were guessing wrong. And not, no harm intended. They didn't know, but what was on the cover of magazines was just as assuredly going to hurt you as it was going to help you. Teaching has gotten much, much better in the last 5, 6, 7 years as our diagnostic equipment has become more precise. Teaching has become more precise. These antiquated ideas about hanging left, staying left, and all the rest have gotten kicked to the curb. Social media has worked like peer pressure, and those bad ideas have been proven wrong by tracing, say, in pressure maps and high-speed video. And so teaching now understands where power comes from. So first of all, everybody wants to hit it far, and the quickest way to help your game is to hit it far. So they understand where power comes from, that it has to move. If you're a right-handed golfer, it's got to move to the right. And then obviously it's got to move a little up, and then it's got to move a little down. It's got to move a little left. It's got to rotate. So no longer, they're getting very good at tracing center of mass. And so they know where power comes from. What Bryson did was great because he took the long drive moves that you see exaggerated for distance. He took those moves and tried to incorporate them into a golf swing that was already proven to be successful. Not great. His golf swing was not great. And his game was not great, but it was very good. And it was going to make him millions of dollars. And he was going to probably win 6, 7, 8 golf tournaments. But now he's become a force in the game because he took long drive movements that he previously didn't have because he used to hang left. He changed his movement patterns, but he also kept in some accuracy moves. So it was a wonderful distillation of how accurate teaching has become. It was able to literally change a person's thumbprint and for the better. And I think all of teaching stood up and watched. There's loads of teachers now that understand the mechanics of what Bryson did. And you're going to see it, not so much, I think, a windfall of it on the PGA Tour over the next few years, but in 10 years, because everybody that was watching Bryson was in high school or, middle school. And they're going to take note and they're going to train that way. So they're going to come out on tour with clubhead speeds of 130, 135, and 140 miles an hour. And so Bryson is just the tip of the iceberg. And, what happened with Rory, I think, was, of course, he was trying to do what Bryson did. He was trying to hit it farther, but not with, I don't think he was using quite the diagnostic tools that Bryson was using. And nobody has the time that Bryson has. I mean, Bryson's not married, as far as I know. He doesn't have a girlfriend, he doesn't have any kids, and he spends every waking moment training. And that's hard work, certainly, and that's great knowledge. But I mean, most people have more balance in their life, and they don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. Rory, trying to hit the ball farther, just started, at least in my view, trying to swing harder without the proper understanding of the construction of his backswing and movement patterns on the downswing. And Rory also got, I think when you're trying to swing harder, you can go on YouTube and you'll see all this evidence about keeping your left hip inside your left foot. And that is certainly on the way down, even your left knee. So just keep that internal rotation in your left knee and keep your left foot inside the inside part of your left foot. And you'll see a lot of players do this. And that is, that you'll see most long drivers do it. And that's certainly a way to hit the ball high, hit it with very little spin, and maximize power principles. But I argue with Lucas Wald about this all the time, that is not how the best golfers in the world play golf. That's how Jamie Sadlowski created power. But that's not what Jack Nicklaus did. It's not what Ben Hogan did. It's not what Sam Snead did. They moved more laterally. They got the left knee over the left foot or even to the outside of the left foot. Hogan famously said he had, this secret and that secret. He wrote about the cup on the left wrist. But I have another book where I found Hogan telling a very good friend of his that his secret really was feeling pressure move diagonally across his lead foot from, say, the inside part of his lead foot to the diagonally to the little toe of his lead foot. And then the pressure traced from that point through impact to his heel, which is essentially saying that left knee gets to your lead foot. It gets over it. It even gets slightly past it and moves backwards. Not many people will know about what Pete Cowan teaches, but Pete Cowan, amongst, many things that he thinks are deal breakers in the golf swing, but he believes that left knee should move up to your lead foot, even past it, and then backwards. And I think that got Rory, because Rory was hitting a lot of pulls. And I think part of that was he wasn't getting his lead hip far enough up to his left foot. He was just using power principles and maximizing them out. And I think Pete Cowan helped Rory get back on track. I thought Pete, I was curious to see what he would do. because Pete, a lot of people will say Pete is the best teacher in the world, but he's very mysterious. You can't he won't talk about what he teaches. He won't talk about his students. His students don't talk about what he's working on. So it's really hard to find out what Pete likes, dislikes, and so forth. But I was curious, and there's still some things I think Rory's struggling with. Driving accuracy is one of them, but it was good to see Rory sort of find his winning ways again.
So Brandel, let's go a little deeper into the lateral versus rotational talk. You mentioned, with the long drive guys, obviously this up backswing down motion to just load the ground, and then it's a rotation and almost a jump at impact to kind of clear everything out of the way. And then you mentioned Hogan and Nicholas and those guys didn't do it quite like that. They had more lateral. Is that from, controlling irons, low point stuff? Like there's this, and I've got this question for the end for you, but the driver swing and the iron swing are kind of different as far as one's on a tee and way forward, one's on the ground, we're hitting down. Hal and I talk all the time about low point control, controlling where the club hits the ground. And one of the things going down this long drive route that all of our kids are wanting to go down is they can't control the bottom. They don't know where they can't hit a soft little pitching wedge into the wind from 125. It's full send all the time. And do you think that's why you saw this mixture of hard rotation and jumping with driver, but then Hogan would still get out in front of it a little bit and compress it and stay on top of it?
Yeah. So look, I mean, like Hal, and there were a number of people that did this in the 80s. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Hal worked with Jimmy Ballard, right, Hal?
Yeah, I did.
Well, so of course, I'm watching Hal. I go get Jimmy Ballard's book. I read it, and I look at it, and there's Curtis Strange worked with Jimmy Ballard. Leonard Thompson worked with Jimmy Ballard. Lots of others, but they're the most famous, Curtis and Hal. And Hal was a guy who, Jimmy wanted you to, move laterally in your backswing because he wanted you to keep the flex in the right leg, or at least that's the way I understood Jimmy Ballard. So there wasn't a lot of turn, and then move laterally in your downswing. But what that did, it didn't allow you to hit it really long, but it controlled your spine angle. So your spine angle was more, I would say, it didn't have a lot of tilt away from the target. You were on top of it, which is how you hit it straight. You're covering it. You think about Calvin Pete. You go back and look at Calvin Pete's golf swing, and he's not back, right? He's not back. His left hip's not inside his left heel. It's sort of on top of the inside of his left foot. And his spine angle was more up and down. So if you're trying the opposite, obviously, is how you hit power, and that's the rub. Power is you get behind it, you stay behind it, you rotate and elevate, right? And you're right, Chase, the driver swing, you're elevating and extending. You're up, you're extending. And iron swings, you're more on top of it. And you go from having sort of this extension of your body to hit it long to having this hollow body or curve to hit it straight. You're on top of it, and your right shoulder's more, it's like if you were trying to touch your chin with your right shoulder, it would feel like that. So you're on top of it. Well, that's not how you hit it long. You hit it long the other way. So the rub is, how do you blend the two? How do you hit it long and straight with your driver? And how are you, if you're a great driver with a lot of power, how are you also able to, get on top of it with your iron? So that's the rub. But I think personally, and this is the great thing about golf swings, is that you can sit here and debate them all day long, and it's fun. And you can find exceptions to every swing thought idea you hold. Every single one of them. There's somebody that does it completely opposite to what you're saying is ideal. But in general, I would say, you obviously move off the ball, you get width, you turn in the backswing, you have lateral movement in the downswing. Lucas would say very little, if any, lateral. That hip's got to stay on inside, well inside, more inside the better. And if you elevate, that's why you see floating lead foots. They're up off the ground, because the more that hip stays inside the lead foot and you rotate and elevate, it's going to move up and it's going to move back. Floating left foots are everywhere now. They used to be sort of hard to see, but that is because power is being taught over, I would say, precision. I think personally, you can find a blend between the two, and that lead knee needs to get up to the lead foot, which controls, your bottom. Because you think about it, if you're hanging back, if your left hip is inside your left foot, where's your low point? You're hitting up on your driver. So the low point was behind where the ball is. Your low point was somewhere back there. Well, that's not ideal for irons, unless you're going to throw the ball all the way back, but you want to hit your irons up in the air. So how do you hit your irons up in the air? Well, you can't do it with a lot of forward shaft lean. You want to have the most neutral, shallow angle of attack that you can to hit your irons as high as you can, so you want to move the irons sort of up in your stance. And how are you going to have neutral shaft lean, very little shaft lean with your irons and still compress them? You've got to have some lateral movement. And that left knee, to me, it's got to get up over that left foot. And I mean, I've got so many videos in my phone of the best. And I argue with these, and these are great teachers. I think Luke is fabulous. Gankis teaches the lead knee a lot different than Lucas. And they even both argue over it. But if you're talking about low point, to me, there's got to be lateral movement and rotation and obviously extension, but you're more on top of it, controlling your spine angle. This is what Butch Harmon does so well, because Butch doesn't believe in the extension of the trail leg. He doesn't believe in that. He teaches, a flex. Go back and look at Tiger 2000. Flex. He keeps the flex in his right leg. I don't like it. And I could make an argument. I think you can make a good argument. That's where Tiger's back issues stem from. But nonetheless, the greatest golf that's ever been played in 2000 was by a guy with flex in his right leg. But the one thing Tiger did then was he had huge width. He moved off of the ball. And he was such a physically gifted individual that he could still turn his shoulders 120 degrees while restricting with his lower body. And then Tiger, Butch talks all the time about, maintaining spine angle on the way down. So getting back, right where you need to be to deliver the club, not hanging back, but getting back to the ball. And Tiger, like Nicklaus, did a great job of getting behind it in the backswing, turning, and then getting back on top of it and covering it in the through seam. And Chuck Cook, when I tell him that Jack covered the ball, he gets irate at me. He's like, he didn't cover the ball. I'm like, well, you and I, because he thinks Hogan covered the ball. I'm like, okay, you're right. Nobody covered the ball like Hogan. He did. But when I say covered the ball, I'm talking about Jack got back on top of it. Okay, Jack was trying to hit it straight up in the air. Hogan wasn't. But Jack got back in a position to release the club neutrally, pretty much the same way Hogan did.
Al, thoughts?
Well, I don't know that we've had anybody on that gave us that descriptive of a definition of accuracy versus length, to be honest with you, Brandel. And, you're bringing back a lot of memories for me because I covered the ball during that era, probably is, if not the best, one of the best.
Damn straight you did. And
I hit it. I got on top of it. My low point in here right now, if I were to stand up here and hit some balls, my low point is, 5-6 inches past the ball with a 7-iron. Because I got my left hip up to my lead foot, just exactly like you're talking about. And, I started trying to hit it further and trying to hit it higher and keep the left hip back, just like you're talking about. And I've got hip replacement, knee replacement now. And absolutely. So, I hope people out there are listening to some of this. I think this is the one thing that I'm certain of in the game. There has to be a balance of all of this stuff. And you mentioned that just a minute ago. Here's what I know. You can go down the rabbit hole of all of something and you will fail. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but you better be listening to all of it and putting every bit of this together to form your thumbprint. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody can do it. You talked about Tiger. He was physically gifted enough that he could keep the flex in his right leg, just like you talked about, turn his shoulders 120 degrees. So few people have ever come along that could do that. So I hope everybody's listening to what you just said. I heard it.
Right. There is a balance, and if you go back, and this is the wonderful thing about YouTube. I mean, when I was, taking lessons from the best teachers in the world, I didn't have another resource to really check whether or not their ideas were based in an aesthetic ideal, in other words, their bias, or they were based in a historical ideal. Now then, doesn't matter the teacher. You can just go on YouTube and look, spend 2 days looking and go, okay, I've got 50 players that do it 50 of the best players ever that don't do anything that you're prescribing. They don't keep the flex in the right leg. They don't resist with the lower body. Now, where that idea originated from is, it's hard to get right to it, but I have no doubt in my mind that it started with Ben Hogan's 5 fundamentals, because in there he talks about the right knee, his trail knee, never moving. He writes that, well, Herbert Warren Wynn wrote the book, but he says his right knee never moved. Now, I will go to Houston for the Colonial, and I will run into some Hogan aficionados there, and I will go to dinner with them, and I will they'll go, oh, his right knee never moves. I'm like, I know he wrote that, but no. And then I'll pull out video and I'll go, here's his right knee. It straightens, it turns, it absolutely moves. They're like, well, when was that video taken? That's got to be a bad angle. And I'm like, no, his right knee moved, and it did not hold flex, and he did not feel resist. I mean, he may have felt resistance with his lower body, but he did not resist. And they will fight you tooth and nail, in spite of the fact that I do not have a single video of Hogan's right knee not moving. Every video I have, and I have hundreds of them in my phone, his right knee, if this is his kneecap, right, it goes back and it rotates. And if it's pointing at 12 when he starts to swing, it's pointing at 2 when he gets to the top of the swing, just like Snead's. Now, I mean, he didn't straighten it quite like Snead's, but close. And it started with that book, in my view. And people thought, well, that's the secret. He resisted, and that right knee never moved. I'd go play golf at Oak Hills in San Antonio with all my good Texas golf buddies. And they were like, well, you got to keep that right knee in. Keep it in on the backswing. Keep pressure on the inside of your right foot. And put a ball underneath the outside of your right foot and swing back, right? Now, I'm a good athlete. You're a good athlete. We could do these things, right? I could do it. I could turn my shoulders and I could still hit it good. And it would certainly give you a leap into the golf ball. But now we can pull up video and we can zoom in on Nicklaus, even Snead, Hogan, and we can see that they all did something in their backswing that, those whose job it is to anatomically describe with precision what they're doing. It sounds a little odd to the ear, but that's called inner ankle high, right? So that's literally their foot is not braced in like this. Even Mickey Wright talks about it in her book, which I have right here behind me, but she talks about hitting, but when she'd hit shots, her foot would look like this at the top, right? It would look like pressure was on the outside of her heel. And almost every great player did that. Like, they turned so much that the pressure was almost on the outside of their foot. Now, they may have felt it on the inside, but you could see that it wasn't. Okay. So Hogan talked about pressure on the inside. Jack talked about pressure on the inside. They talked about resisting. I think that got misunderstood, and for a lot of very good reasons, by teachers, who then went to the various periodicals in golf and said, this is it. This is the secret. We can do this. Cover the magazine, cover the magazine, cover the magazine, article. Decades goes by. And then you've got, Butch Harmon. He's teaching, keep the flex in the right leg. I got David Ledbetter, keep the flex in the right leg. I got video, pictures, and illustrations in all their books of people behind there holding the right knee as they make a backswing. There's David Ledbetter behind Nick Faldo holding his right knee as he makes a backswing. Now, again, there's no malicious intent here. It's just they're taking an idea that Ben Hogan wrote about, but in no way did. Now, if they'd had YouTube, David Ledbetter, Butch Harmon, growing up, if they'd had YouTube, they could have seen, well, he didn't do that. And they probably wouldn't have taught it. But they did teach it for decades. Nobody teaches that now. Nobody. Zero. Every great teacher taught that for 40 years. Every teacher I went to. When I was in college, okay, I wasn't as good as Hal Sutton in college, but I was pretty darn good. And I could hit it high and I could hit it long. And And when I started, I got so good, all of a sudden, you get good, you get really good. Next thing you know, you turn around, there's a bunch of teachers behind you. And I like taught golf swing. And I'd taught golf swing. Every one of them told me I needed to keep the flex in my right knee, turn against that resistance. And so I didn't know that I didn't keep the flex in my right knee, but I had to have hit the ball high and long. Because the minute I started keeping that flex in my right knee and my hands and the club head in front of me, that was their catchphrase, I lost 20 yards. And I thought, well, it's just me because these are the best teachers in the world. Again, I don't harbor, they're not, they didn't know. And I didn't know. But now we have YouTube and we can go we have the video library. It's like the Library of Congress. And I can go look at every single player. I can mark it. I can take it. I can drag it over to V1. I can measure it. And I am, now when I'm talking to a teacher, we're both on the same ground. Nobody gets to tell me something that I can't check. And that's that creates a great collaborative effort between teacher and student now that didn't exist before. And there needs to be that exchange. And to your original point, Hal, you're right. There has to be some balance between power and precision.
So, Brandel, and how I want your take on this too. I got a little follow up on the distance question. I was blessed to work. I was traveled on tour with Bryson and Mike Shy before Bryson went to Como. And, when he first got out on tour, and I mean, he already had plans of building up his body and going down this distance route. He didn't go crazy into it until COVID hit, but he was talking about it and going down this path. Is it better for a good, because some really good players went down this distance, like Hal talks about, went down chase distance and they played their way right off the tour. Would we rather have good players that were already established as a world-class player chase distance? Or would we rather have world-class distance, a Sadlowski, a Kyle Berkshire, try to figure out how to play the game? Is there a route that you can try and go down? And this question may not even be answerable, but I'd love your opinion on both of them. Both of you guys' opinion on the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Hal, you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
I would say, look, for years, yes, when I saw players chase distance, I saw a lot of players lose their games and gone. Okay, but they chased distance the wrong way. They were not chasing it with the precision that you can chase distance now. So now recently we've seen players like Cameron Tregale chase distance and pick up right at 10 miles an hour club head speed in 1 year. We saw Phil Mickelson chase distance and find it. Now I would argue that Phil pushing off his lead foot is the very thing that is holding him back with his iron play, because his iron play is deteriorated because he used to have more slide and be more up on top of his lead foot. And that's why he was a much, much better iron player. So Phil's kind of, I think, gone a little bit the wrong way, but Bryson chased distance, found it, got longer. There are other examples, but Ian Baker Finch or Luke Donald, those are two players I can think of that chase distance to their detriment. They did it the wrong way. They were trying to do it with width or going to the gym. And I'm not saying going to the gym is a bad idea, but they weren't doing it with the precision that Bryson did it. Okay, so now it's a lot easier to chase distance. All you have to do, just in a nutshell, this game can be very simple. Extend your trail leg, turn your hips, let your body come up a little bit, and lift your lead heel. You are, they've done TrackMan tests on this. They've taken amateurs out. Lift your lead heel, don't lift your lead heel. It's a difference of 5 miles an hour for sedentary lifestyle amateurs. Just like that, 5 miles an hour club head speed. You want to turn more, lift your lead heel, turn your hips. You will automatically extend your trail leg a little bit. Okay, you'll get more turn. You'll get more arm extension, right? Your hand path won't be here. It'll be here. It'll be there. You'll get there. Jamie Sadlowski's hands pass back here. Why? Because he's extending and turning. And, the deeper, higher, longer your hand path is, bigger your turn is, the more speed you're going to create. So I think it's easier for tour pros to pick up speed than it is for long drive players to try to play the tour, because, there's all kinds of deep dives on talent acquisition. But talent acquisition is something you build up over a very long period of time. But you have to do it, in a very specific way. And tour pros, whether they know it or not, have acquired talent through deep dives, deep practice. And, you can get very, very technical on this, but in essence, you have all these nerve endings in your body, right? All these nerve endings. You may have read the talent code. Have you ever read the talent code?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, then you're familiar with what I'm talking about. So you have all these nerve endings, and the more myelin you have around those, and you only get that myelin, that insulation around the nerve. You only get that insulation through deep, thoughtful practice. And so when it comes to hitting little bitty pitch shots, shallow shots off tight lies, trap shots off tight lies, buried bunker shots, sky high cuts into right to left wind, sky high draws into left to right wind, all of those things, that talent acquisition took place in people that are good enough to play the tour at a very early age in their life. And it's in there. It's like their DNA. And for people who have just spent their lives trying to hit golf shots long, they're at an older age. And so they're at a much bigger disadvantage to create that mile, okay? To create that insulation around those nerves, and basically to create the talent, to acquire the talent, to acquire the skill. To do that, they're behind the eight ball. And sure, they can go give it all their effort. And I'm hopeful that one of them will figure that out. But the odds are certainly against them, because the players they're going up against are so ungodly talented. They're so unbelievably talented at all those things, all those situational aspects of the game, all those nuanced aspects of the game, all of those things that are intuition. The 4 different levels of talent acquisition essentially are sort of unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. And you want to get at unconscious competence. You want to get at that spot where you're not even thinking. The talent's in you. We'll call it it's not muscle memory, but for lack of it's there. Okay, you don't have to think about how to hit a cut shot off a tight lie into a right to left wind with OB on the right. You don't have, you've hit a million, you've hit so many of them. It's just in there. And so the more nuance you can think about the lie, you can think about your body chemistry, you can think about where the ball is going to land, you can think about contours on the green. But if you're not there and you're having to think about all the things necessary to hit that cutoff tight line to right left wind, you're thinking about all those things and not the lie or your body chemistry or where it's going to land or the contours of the green. And so you will miss all that and you'll get your ass beat by the fella who doesn't have to think about his golf swing. So it's a long road for long drivers to go out and beat unimaginably talented players who have acquired talent so long ago and put the thoughts to bed and are just out there painting masterpieces.
Did you ever read the book Smart Golf by Charles Kemp? He was a professor at TCU.
Smart Golf?
Smart Golf. Written a long time ago. He was a professor at TCU, and he interviewed all of the great old players. And he said in conclusion of this book that all the greatest players played with quiet minds, which is what you just described. And you, when you played your best golf, Brandel, myself, when I played my best golf, I did not have to think about where I moved my body, where my weight was going, where the club head was going. It just automatically happened because of all of the hours that you and I spent leading up to that point.
That's right.
You know, when I got to the 18th tee against Tiger that day, I didn't have to think about what I had to do in order to hit that shot down the center of the fairway.
No, right.
And, actually, here's the truth. I had it to, and most really good players have it like this. They have an exact timing that they're pulling everything off to where they're thinking about what they need to think about and not thinking about anything else. And that's usually to the second the same for everybody that's playing at that really high level. Anything that I took longer than that, any time I took longer than that, allowed these other thoughts to creep into my head, which could cause things to go afoul. So, one of the biggest things that I'm a big proponent of is it's not all golf swing that makes a great player.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's so much more to being a great player than just a good golf swing. You and I both seen a lot of good golf swings come along, and they never really made it. And then we look at somebody like Jim Furyk, who didn't have the conventional golf swing, third leading money winner of all time. And, I think Jim Furyk would have been good any way he did it, because I think he's got that kind of mind. And I think that's something that people have to hear out there more so, because we're caught up in this world of technology. We know that it's a big advantage to have it. And we've got to use it wisely. And we've got to realize that there's a lot more to it than just that.
Absolutely. Tiger has said that at his best, he could remember before a shot pulling the club out of the bag, but then everything else was just a blur until he was walking after the shot. That just tells you how quiet his mind was. I can remember, playing and just getting lost in my target, when I was playing my best, and not lost in swing thoughts. But you're right, it is a quiet mind. And you'd say, well, you don't want to have negative thoughts, right? Oh, that's obvious. But if you're busy thinking about the tasks at hand, there is no place for negative thoughts. And it's not like negative thoughts are bad. Like, everybody is susceptible to one coming in. I have no doubt that Jack would have probably had one occasionally. But Jack, if you read him, he would talk about, the many goals that he would create. And he would talk about how he would categorize different problems out in front of him. Out of bounds was a 4. Water was a 3, deep rough was a 2, shallow rough, shallow bunkers was a 1. Like, Jack he had such organization about where his priorities were out there on the landscape. So very methodical about what he was thinking about. There's no room for, transient thoughts of failure. He was just narrowing the scope down and then pulling that trigger. I love the process before a player hits a golf shot. I love it. I love watching it because, it's a mystery to all of us. What's going on? What are they thinking? How are they getting into it? But when you see somebody get into a shot the way, say, Lee Trevino did, get into a shot, have the same movements. He looks so authoritative, so confident. You think, well, he makes the game look simple. We know Lee Trevino, I think he got home from the Army in 60. Really didn't hear much about him till the 66 U.S. Open, where he finished like 60th. But he spent 6 years hitting balls all day, all night. He was working at a range, and he would just pick up balls all night. So he trained himself, and then he turned it loose. As a quiet mind, it's beautiful to watch. But again, we get back to, can long drive guys acquire that much skill to make them one of the best in the world playing it competitively? Of course they can. It's just they're competing against players that long ago put those things to bed. One of my favorite stories, you probably know the story if you've ever been around or lucky enough to have been around Harvey Penick before he passed away. And I went to UT, so I would go out and occasionally spend time watching Harvey teach and spend time with him. It's one of my favorite stories about how hard it is to play this game at the highest level. He was working with a scratch golfer at his club who was 45 years old. And the guy was in great shape, and he'd made a whole lot of money. And Harvey said to him, what do you want to do? He goes, listen, he goes, I've made all the money I need for the rest of my life. He goes, I got all the time in the world, and I'm going to spend every waking moment from now until I'm 50 making my way to trying to compete on the Champions Tour. And without missing a beat, Harvey goes, oh my gosh, I got to introduce you to another member here at the club. He's just like you. He's 45. He's made all the money he's ever going to need the rest of his life. And like you, he's going to spend every waking moment from now until he's 50 trying to make it on the Champions Tour. His name's Tom Kite. And I mean, that explains, it's like, you're not going to beat Tom Kite. Tom Kite, he hit a remember the year, and I think when he first put a 60 in the bag in the early 80s, 82, 83, you'd have been on the tour then. I was in college.
Yeah.
He first put a 60 in the bag, and Pels kept the data. You could go dig this up, but I think it was something like inside 100 yards. He got it up and down over 80% of the time. Now that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, that is.
He changed everybody's, that was a cataclysmic moment in the world of golf, because now everybody has a 60 in their bag.
Or more.
Or more. Well, that all derives from Dave Pell's research, and then Tom Kite putting it in the bag and becoming so proficient at it. Could a long drive person go out and a long drive competitor, you think about the talent acquisition, the time it took for Tom Kite to get that good, that proficient with a wedge. You think about his ability to develop that skill. That didn't just come about overnight. I mean, that was 20 years of developing those nerve endings and surrounding them with the insulation to acquire that skill, to solidify that skill. And it's just like I said, it's a heck of a lot easier for tour players to add 15, 20 yards than it is for long drive competitors to acquire all the skill necessary to compete at the professional level.
Brandel, we talk about the Milan sheath like a highway, because you made the analogy.
Yes,
look,
that's right.
A highway, you signing your name on a chalkboard, that highway's a 15-lane, 20-lane highway going 150 miles an hour. You start trying to write your name left-handed, that's a 1-lane highway, dirt road.
Good analogy. Great analogy.
Going 10 miles an hour, and it just takes forever to get it right. So we definitely talk about that here. I'm curious your take. I was looking at your Twitter the last couple of days. Where do you stand on we've had Scott Fawcett on, a decade, and we're definitely fans of decade, but we, Hal and I both talk about sometimes where it's not always black and white. What's your take on angles? What's your take on all the stats and decade golf and all this stuff?
I've said for years, for years, that the idea of chasing angles was fantasy. And I always use the 18th hole at the TPC Sawgrass as an example. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but in my mind, there is no player in his right mind that would chase the angle at the 18th at the TPC Sawgrass to gain the angle into the green. And in other words, nobody was good enough to try and get it down the left side of that fairway, to literally aim there and try to get it down the left side of that fairway so that they could get the angle into that green. Nobody would do that. You wouldn't take on that risk. And so when I hear people talk about angles, I would think, well, I know we used to always say people could hit it. And look, guys did hit it straighter with wooden clubs and wound golf balls. They hit it a lot straighter. And so, maybe Hogan was good enough to chase angles. Maybe Hal Sutton hit it straight enough to chase angles, but that's in the rear view. Nobody's good enough now to chase angles from a precision standpoint. So I think what Scott, and I've been to his classes. I enjoy Scott and Lou. Lou's Degner is just brilliant. And so Scott, I've been to their classes, and, they have a formula that basically, and I certainly don't need to diminish their research, but basically says play conservative golf.
At least into greens, aggressive off the tee, conservative into greens, basically.
Yeah, I suppose, but it's aggressive off of the tee within a dispersion cone. So you just lay your dispersion cone out there, and you have an aiming point. You just don't deviate from your dispersion cone. If your dispersion cone doesn't fit out there in the fairway, if you don't have a 60 wide yard from bad trouble to bad trouble, or from trees to trees, if you don't have that dispersion cone, it's not a driver play. And so, and they give you very specific aiming points that would differ from a lot of them. That's why I've said, some of their students are coming out and schooling veterans who have not taken the time. And I'll give you a good example. The first hole at Royal Melbourne it's a short little par 4, which straight away with just a slight turn up near the green that almost everybody laid up and hit wedge into. Okay. And Ernie Els was adamant that you lay up there. And I think he didn't even play Hao Tong Lee because Hao Tong Lee wanted to go for that green until singles, or, he was upset with Hao Tong Lee's strategy to hit driver there. Well, the decade guys had laid the dispersion cone, and they've done the numbers, right? They run it, and now other stats guys can do this as well. They've run it, and the play 100% of the time was hit driver, send it. Okay, it was not layup, and again, that is where numbers. If let's say a player, of course, if a player's snap hooking it one day or snap slicing, well, he probably wouldn't be on the team, or he probably wouldn't be playing. I mean, if he's good enough to be there, he can keep it in a 60-yard cone. And if you could keep it in a 60-yard cone, 100% of the time, the play is to hit driver at Royal Melbourne. I'm assuming that it's not a 50-mile-an-hour wind in or whatever. And that is just one example of where young players who are looking at Google Earth and using Google Maps to plot out strategy have advantages over veterans. And they know the play. They know what's right. And so, Kathy Whitworth wrote a beautiful book. What the heck is it? It's a beautiful book that I laugh at. I'll send it to Scott sometimes, just jokingly, where she writes, she has, a page. She won 88 times, more than any other professional golfer, 88 times on a major tour. And she said, you aim at the middle of the greens. Okay. That's her secret. So you aim at the middle of the greens. You take trouble out of play. You play conservative. Jack Nicklaus, same thing. Ben Hogan, as good as he was, when he won at Marion in 1950, I was reading this yesterday in some old Grantland Rice articles. And Hogan was talking about, he ran into Grantland Rice early in the week in 1950. And he said of Marion that this golf course is so hard and so demanding that he will not aim at a single pin that week. This is on like Tuesday of 1950. He goes, now this is arguably the greatest ball striker that's ever lived, certainly the greatest ball striker in that event that week, who would not take on a single pin. Okay, that he was going to play conservative. The shot that Hy Peskin took the photo of Ben Hogan in the 18th green at Marion, that is probably the most famous photograph ever taken in golf. That's a 1-iron, and Ben hit it 40 feet. And, if you see that, you think, oh, Ben must have stuffed it. No, he hit it 40 feet and 2-putted to get into the playoff. But his strategy was just to hit it at the middle of the greens. And, we love to think about Johnny Miller never seeing, going at every flag, and Lanny Watkins going at every flag. And those things are wonderful to think about. And Andy Martinez told me once that Johnny Miller played a stretch of golf where the farthest an iron shot ever deviated from the flag was like 3-4 feet. And Andy doesn't lie. I believe in Andy. It's just said, you look at the data and nobody's that straight now. Nobody. Now, I did argue, because I went to one of these clinics with Scott and Lou, and they were talking about, with this club wedge, you aim 5 steps to the right, maybe 4, and this one 6. And it was always, within the parameters. There were very few times that you could just go right at it. And if there's no trouble around it, you could go right at it. And and they gave me a chart, and I said, these are the averages. And I said, so, all right, so here's my question. So if Tiger Woods is playing around a golf at his best, and he is on average feet better than second best, and about 4, 5, 6 feet better than the average, these are his numbers? And they said, yeah, those are his numbers. I was like, okay, and that we can have these disagreements. I mean, I think they're brilliant guys, but in my view, I can't imagine Tiger Woods having exactly those conservative numbers. But again, Tiger Woods famously said, major championships, middle of the green, 2-putt until the birdie opportunity comes along. So, I think these guys, and Scott and Lou are the best 2 examples right now. They're properly training players how to play golf the way it used to take veterans 10 years to sort of figure out. They've shortened vastly shortened the apprenticeship necessary in the game of golf.
I had to take a second here. I'm not sure where to go with this. It ran longer than we thought it was going to. It was so good. And we decided to go into 2-part series on this. because it was so good and Brandel was so free-spirited with everything that he thought, and he led both Chase and I into many other things that we didn't even follow our outline most of the time.
Right.
So we're going to come back at you with part 2. It's even better.
Be the right club today. Yes!